Heyo! Episode 3 of the Double F podcast with me, Fahad Farouk. Thank you so very much for being here. What are we going to talk about today? And this is something that's applicable to people across ages, from people who've just left university or who've just finished education, who are getting into work, or even people who've been working for a couple of years, or even people who've just started their jobs. And this is about having a career crisis. Episode 3, Career Crisis. Let's get into it. All right, so I think in my life I've worked several jobs. I was a newsreader at a radio station for about 4.5 years. Then I worked at a publications company as a part of an advertising agency for about 8 to 10 months. Between those times, when I was studying, I did some part-time work delivering gifts during Christmas for another radio station. I'm doing a lot of radio station stuff. Amidst all of that, then occasionally I dabbled in a bit of wedding photography, portrait photography, trying to make it sound a bit posh. I did some graphic design for a while. That was interestingly successful. I thought of making a career in music. I played bass for a very, very short time in a band or two or three. And finally I settled for a career. I wouldn't say settled, but I found myself, or it found me accidentally, in a career in training and consulting. During all that time, I did my emceeing gigs, event hosting, comparing and stuff like that. And something that I understood, something that's been carved into our brain from a very small age is that you need to find what your career is. You need to find what your career choice or option is. Because we're told that we're supposed to be specialized, what are you going to do with your career? Because of that, because my parents told me to, I studied CIMA, that's management accounting. I don't know shit, man. I can't remember which side's debit or credit. I was really bad at it. And it was a huge crisis in a sense that there was a time that I didn't know which path or career that I should take. And at the same time, there were some friends who were super certain, like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to study this, and I'm going to be this, and I'm going to make this much money. And there were some friends like, man, we're just like you, we have no clue. And it was scary because all these kids, they knew what they wanted and they had the opportunity to pursue what they wanted. And here I was, and I was like confused as hell. I understand that it's not an isolated case, that there are lots of people like that. Either they don't know what they want, they don't know what opportunities are present, or even if they did, they don't have the resources available to go achieve these things or do these things. But all that being said, I'm extremely thankful for this age we're living in, because in this day and age, with the internet, with various resources available for you, there is no excuse for not making something work. So while we might think, what line of work should I take? Should I start my own business or not? I'm unhappy with my current job. I want to do a part-time thing and a full-time thing as well. What I'm saying is that there's scope and space to experiment with all of that. Again, it isn't easy, but it's available. And there was a time in this world when that was not available, and now it is currently available. What we need to understand is that careers are not linear anymore. It's not a sense of where you're an apprentice or you're a junior learning something, and then you progress, and then you become more good, or you become better at doing that thing, and then suddenly you're like medium, and then you're a senior, and then you're an expert type of thing. That's a sort of apprentice mentality. That's not the case anymore. The context is different, like I said, because the opportunities are more. So like I was saying earlier, for a while I was discovering my footing as a sort of trainer and a consultant, at that time a friend of mine taught me how to use a DSLR. That's a camera. And then I experimented with wedding photography. I actually shot about 3 weddings, albums and everything. And I discovered that while I enjoyed taking pictures of like sceneries and stuff like that, the stress of shooting a wedding was just too much. At the same time, I also was hosting events. I was hosting, little not dinner dances, but press conferences, corporate gatherings, and stuff like that. At the same time, I was also doing a bit of graphic design because another friend taught me how to use Photoshop, and then as it progressed, another friend taught me how to use Illustrator, and designing little posters and logos. Made a bit of money from that as well. At the same time, there was also the band thing. I mean, I guess at the back of my mind, I understood that it wouldn't be a career, but it was sort of planted there. And I bought myself a guitar, and then my friend Khan used to teach me how to play guitar, and then that guitar became bass. I don't think I was very good at it, but that was something that I was doing as well. Then all of these things for me, I remember one of my bosses at the time used to say, you're really confused. You're starting this, you're stopping this, you're starting this, you're stopping that. And I got it into my brain that yes, I am confused. Why can't I decide on one thing? And that's when I understood. And this was inspired by this song Sunscreen by Baz Luhrmann, I think, Suntan Sunscreen. And one of the lines roughly said, it's all right to not know what you want to do or what you want to be at like 35 or something. Some of the most interesting people still don't know what they want to do at 45. Not exactly, but something like that. And I understood that it's this machine, that pushes us. Finish education by this age, degree, whatever, MBA, whatever, then job by this age, then marriage, and then that entire stupid cookie cutter mold of how the world seems to dictate how we should live. And I decided that it's about discovery on your own pace. And for me, some of those things, yes, I spent a bit of money trying to learn. Some things I couldn't invest money, so I just couldn't learn it because I didn't have the money. Some of those things, yes, I wasted time. Some of those things came to me by accident. Some of those things I actively pursued. But the lesson here is that we need not look at career as a linear line. We need to look at it as various streams that are available. And from these streams, what are the things we can sort of pick up on? Now, there is another perspective here, and that is privilege. Now, maybe I was privileged enough to be able to experiment because both my parents were alive, and I didn't have to contribute a large amount of money to the family. We weren't well to do, but we managed. And I had the privilege or space to be able to experiment. Now, there might be some instances where you don't have that privilege or space and you have no choice, but you need to start earning money for your family. And I'm not preaching in a sense to people who can or can't do that, but I'm only asking you to ask yourself a question. Do I have space with all the other things I'm doing to try and devote some time to experiment with something else that might turn into a money-making venture in the future? And I don't mean just business, but if you take these websites where you can, you can proofread, you can write, you can try some graphic design, you can do voicings, so many other things that might work, might not, but we wouldn't know until we try. We wouldn't know until we look to see what's there. The important thing in this is, in today's economy, I don't think, and I've seen evidence for this, it's not just one skill, earlier they were looking for people who could just do a job, but then with time it came, if you could do this job plus you had Excel and MS Word, then if you could do this, you had Excel, MS Word, and if you had this, it's an added benefit, and that just keeps growing, right? What we need to understand with that is that it's about accumulation of skills so that you can put it together and then present it back in a sort of unique package that the market hasn't seen or people are willing to pay you more for. An example is that when I started out as an MC or an event compier, I assumed it was only one style. It was very stiff because that's all I'd seen, like, ladies and gentlemen, etc., etc. But when I got into training and I was more, sort of informal, I understood that, people responded to it. And then I brought that flavor of my personality into my events. Now, then my event style became more fluid. And because of that, there were some people who were like, no, we don't want that style. We want a very formal style, and that's fine. And there are some people like, this style's great. We didn't see you this way before, and now we do. Or this would go well for this type of event. So some opportunities will be missed and some opportunities will be created. And it's an amalgamation of these things. For example, because of the fact that I used to, dabble in photography and graphic design and stuff, that gives me some perspectives, not as an expert by no means, but it gives me a little bit of perspective of how I look at some other things. Like if I was doing some promo for my training programs, I could do it myself. That would cut the lead time of talking to an external designer, getting it done. Or even if I didn't have time to do it, I could tell the designer, these are the design aspects that I want. And it's about this amalgamation or collection of skills. So a question to ask is, as you progress on this journey, what are the unique set of skills you're looking to accumulate along the way? And accumulation of skills does not mean that you need to be, spending money. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But also it doesn't mean that you should, quit your job and go do it. You could do it while you're working. And that brings me to the final point, and that is you should understand when to prioritize learning over money. I know it's very tempting, especially when you're young, to get that job, to get that independence, to get that sense of freedom, in terms of being able to buy your own things and do your own shit. But you need to understand that learning is an investment, and whether you're learning on the job or you're learning while not working or whatever, you need to understand which opportunities will give you what. Some jobs will pay you shit, but the learning opportunities are great. Sometimes you hit the sweet spot and you get both. At the same time, you need to understand when to stop a learning opportunity job because they're just exploiting you and move towards something that's making you money. It's all about that balance. The thing that I've constantly learned though is that we need to continuously learn. We need to continuously add skill, not upskill, that too, but we need to add skills to our skill set in order to proceed. Like for example, back when I was a newsreader, we started something called a news podcast, right? It was like the week's news recordings and stuff like that. And then we were taught this little software that we could use. Back then it was called Cool Edit Pro or something like that. And I learned it then. And because of that, I use those skills that I can, in any way I can, to edit little audio clips or to even edit this podcast. Now, is it the best quality? By all means, no. It isn't, because the best editors are ones that went to those schools and who learned, and it sounds crisp. But is it minimally viable for me to put out really quickly in order to get the message out? Yeah, it works. It's not perfect, but it works. Now, would I tell someone, hey, I could edit your audio for you, pay me this much? Of course not. I would never do that because I can't give them the output to the quality that they need. But what I'm trying to say is that the skills that we accumulate over time sort of snowballs into creating the product that we are, that we can offer unique solutions to starting new businesses or even prospective employers. It's okay to try new things as long as you have ways to supplement your income and while the risk is low. So in terms of these crises, and you're thinking, what am I going to do? I think you should change the question to what can I learn? From these things that I can learn, what would make me most money? What would I enjoy, type of thing, right? And I mean, it isn't a perfect science, but as we proceed, if we can figure out a way to make this work, then hey, and make some money, why not? All right, that was episode 3, I think, of the Double F podcast. Thank you so very much for listening. I will see you with our next episode. Thank you very much. See ya.